The world around me faded into the background. Noises became muffled. Conversations sounded distant. Explosions barely broke through the mental barrier that was forming between all senses save for sight. My eyes remained transfixed not on the brilliant fireworks displays, nor the zipping of upper yearsmen on fantastical beasts, but instead on the backdrop they all seemingly ignored. The starless skies, and the single moon that hovered ominously overhead. I should have seen it coming. The constantly cloudy skies, the suspiciously overcast weather. I just assumed that the Nexus was simply suffering from a chronic case of British weather prior to the introduction of the Weather Control Network. I made a calculated assessment, but boy am I bad at math. My body suddenly felt hazy as my mind raced to find a way out of what was clearly a dream. I needed to wake up. No. I need to think, I forced out, breaking through the growing mental fugue and the dissociation threatening to tear me from the fabric of the present, prying off the suffocating grip of fundamental systematic incongruency. Think, Emma, think, I continued, my eyes frantically darting back and forth, attempting to dissect the impossible sight before me, whilst 1,000 divergent thoughts started taking up almost all of my available headspace. There's at least a moon, but no stars? Dyson sphere? Dead universe? Boots void type situation? Black domain? Homestar proximity? A nightfall scenario? Near Big Rip? Simulation? I quickly stopped myself, course correcting with a single breath. No. Too crazy, too far. This is reality. This has to be some sort of... I took another breath, looking to the Evie, right as Thasia's stern gaze and the sight of 100 prying eyes forced me out of my reverie. However, not even the combined scrutiny of the masses managed to make a dent in my newfound infatuation, as my body slowly re-entered autopilot once more, my mind easily slipping back into eccentric postulations of an equally eccentric world. Okay. Training. Differential analysis and inference. Analyze, categorize, then hypothesize. Stop with the scatterbrained, stop with the panic, pull back from fundamental systematic incongruency. I chastised myself, forcing in long steady breaths, each of which managed to calm me down somewhat, until I was faced with the sky once more. All right, no stars. Correction, it's not that there are no stars, it's just that there's no stars visible or detectable. I forced myself onto a more grounded mindset, channeling Dr. Mekis and the rest of the science team as I attempted to temper the creatively inclined side of myself. All observable data is fallible. All observable data is prone to observer bias and extraneous environmental factors. All right, okay. Let's start differential analysis. The Evie immediately responded by creating a translucent floating mind map of my HUD, with 2 distinct root nodes sitting idly and standing by. 2 broad categories. 1. There are no stars visible due to observer limitations, either due to some unknown atmospheric phenomenon, anomalous light interaction, the stars themselves being too far away, or next geometrical shenanigans. Fringe explanations could include something physically blocking our line of sight, like a Dyson sphere or shell world. I paused, shaking my head. No, shell world doesn't make sense. We wouldn't see the moon otherwise, I reasoned, before moving forward. Astrophysics explanations that'd make Dr. Mekis cry could include the fact that we might just be further along in time. Maybe the Nexus's universe is so far into its expansion and life cycle that anything that will be observable has already slipped past the cosmological horizon. The first root node was promptly filled, with my hypotheses branching off from it in a tree structure diagram, various branches and child nodes forming to represent my ideas. 2. There are no stars visible simply because there are none, I declared with a shaky voice, the Evie responding by filling in that second root node. However, instead of continuing like I did the first category, I hesitated, as the implications behind such a conclusion were astronomical. This could be due to, heck, I don't know, a dead universe? Maybe we're in an extremely mature universe that's reached the degeneration era? Or maybe we're in a literal pocket dimension that exists without stars. I pondered what I said for a moment before denying it outright. No, that's absolutely insane. Branches and child notes formed after each and every statement, though it was that last one that now remained blinking, the Evie double-checking if I even wanted it there. I felt that child nose staring back at me with incredulity, as if Dr. Mekis himself and the rest of the science team were there on the other side of the virtual workspace, ready to counter my hypothesis. It could, though, I countered verbally, talking to myself now. Entirely new dimension, entirely fantastical rule sets. I pondered, the two sides of myself standing at odds beneath a starless sky. The fantasy-obsessed child within me yelled at me to accept it as the prime hypothesis, while the Emma of the present, that had been molded by a desire to leave fantasy behind following my move to Acela, wanted nothing more than to science the shit out of this impossible sight. We'll get back to that one, I compromised, but first I just realized that a third category might be in order, I ordered, prompting the Evie to generate a third root node. Third, malicious intent. This could all just be a big game of deception on behalf of the Nexus. We can't put it past them after all. They already did the big starless sky reveal. What's to say there's not layers to this? A nanosecond later, and the third tree diagram was branched out. This was followed by a beep as the Evie circled back to the pocket dimension hypothesis. Query. Kill process. Unfinished child node? I thought about it for a minute. However, just before I could respond, we eventually found ourselves arriving at the entrance to the banquet hall. At which point, Thacia quickly regarded me with a worried expression. Emma, are you feeling well? Yes. Are you sure? No, don't kill child, I replied. Though this reply was made before I could properly hit mute, leading to a rather awkward scene where Thacia, Thalmin, Eleanor, and everyone else gathered near the entrance to the stadium's banquet hall all stared at me with varying levels of concern. Oh, I meant to say, wow, I really killed it in this event. This whole thing was child's play. I spoke in an attempt to fix the situation. However, this only ended up with even more perplexed looks and outright worried stares. Well, crap, I sighed inwardly, with a click of the mute button. The Transgration Academy for the Magical Arts. New Gymnasium. Banquet Hall. Local time 1920 hours. Emma. With some quick thinking on behalf of Eleanor by reframing the situation as a new Roma's eccentric approach to the theatre of life, we managed to defuse the situation and made our way inside the banquet hall, where the professors seemed to be busy talking amidst themselves atop of an elevated stage. Hey, Thacia, do you think we can talk about... Shush, Earthrealmer! Isn't one faux pas quite enough? Eleanor chastised. I wanted to argue, but upon seeing how packed the room was, I had to give him some credit. This probably wasn't the best time for it. The whole room was arranged into 4 discrete quadrants, with 4 equally long banquet tables occupying the middle of each of these sections. A passing glance was all that was needed to confirm that this delineation was, in fact, done in order to divide up the houses, as even the tablecloths and waiters' outfits were colour-coded to match the 4 houses. Moreover, the upper years dressed in their house colours were also present at each table. However, the turnout of each house vastly differed, supporting the stratified house prestige theory, which was doubly confirmed with a passing conversation with Eleanor. Yes, Earthrealmer, despite what the official stance may be, it is an open secret that there exists a clear and tangible divide between the prestige of each house. So, what's the actual game here? Like, what are the benefits or disadvantages of house affiliation? I mean, I'm guessing there's always networking, but there's got to be more to it than that, right? I shot back, to which Eleanor levelled back a surprisingly straightforward answer. You underestimate the value of networking, Cadet Emma Booker, for it grants you connections that extend far beyond your graduation. Lifelong alliances may be forged in the hallowed halls of each house, and the futures of entire realms may be decided should the right relations be kindled. This is in addition to the unique academic opportunities within the best of houses. Moreover, each house also grants you access to the physical manifestation of this club-like exclusivity. So, common rooms. House towers, Earthrealmer! Eleanor finally levelled out a frustrated sigh. I knew you'd find it in yourself to debase this rich tradition with commoner drivel, the Venerian chastised, before continuing. It is within these house towers that you are granted access to exclusive libraries of annotated course materials and unique insight passed down through the years. Entire assessments have been memorized and transcribed such that successive years can enjoy the fruits of senior guidance. There is also the matter of additional benefits, including first choice in many academy activities, as well as a direct line of communication to the house professor. But, of course, there is also the house cup, which...
May I have your attention, please? The Dean proclaimed,
his voice reverberating throughout the room.
First years, please line up in front of the stage. It is time for the final act of the house-choosing ceremony.
The man smiled warmly, though once again made it known with just a passive glance that I was firmly on his shit list. Thankfully, however, the terms of my malicious compliance seemed to be unbroken, as I had yet to have been thrown into some dungeon cell.
Let it be known that all of you have performed admirably in my eyes.
The Dean paused, singling out the few groups that had some clear drama during their performances.
Even amongst those who may not have been able to express the fullest extent of your capabilities.
His eyes landed on the portal group, each of them giving sheepish smiles back in response.
And amongst those who pushed the boundaries of acceptable decorum.
He turned towards the group who literally killed a man just to revive them.
Your efforts in demonstrating your abilities are commendable. However, effort is only part of the rubric in today's activities. So please understand that these scores, whilst not representative of your capabilities by the end of your academic career, will still come to dictate the peers you call your house fellows.
The man went on and on following that, going deep into the history of the houses, their achievements, and the achievements of their alumni. It quickly became clear to me what Eleanor meant by networking now. That many housemates tended to form closer diplomatic ties following their graduation and their ascent to their respective thrones. Moreover, it also became clear to me that time seemed to have somehow corrupted the system. Because at first, the choosing seemed to genuinely be based on personal preference, with many first-choice groups deciding upon the less desirable grey and white House Vikurza instead of the de facto first-rate maroon and orange House Shikwaf. Whatever sociological phenomenon was at play here, it was obvious to me that things were now in their pragmatic era. The achievements of only House Shikwaf seemed to be read off in the last 30 minutes of the Dean's lengthy speech. Though at the very end of it, the man actually opened up the opportunity for questions, which I quickly took advantage of, as I aimed to shoot him a question best answered from the horse's mouth. "Professor, if I may?" I asked politely.
"Yes, Cadet Emma Booker,"
the man responded, with the same two-faced smile he always wore. "I'd like to ask a question unrelated to the houses," I began, garnering a tentative nod from the man.
"The floor is yours,"
the Dean spoke mildly, yet shooting me a veiled threat through his glare. "You mentioned that the end of the house-choosing ceremony prompted the removal of all blinds as part of the holdovers of the grace period. I just wanted to ask if there was a reason why the scars were obscured in the first place." The question garnered a decidedly neutral reaction from the man, though there was that glint of relief, as if he was expecting the question to be another library card moment.
"Simple, Cadet Emma Booker. The clouded skies were merely a courtesy. The Academy understands that the grandeur of the Nexian tapestry may be too intense for many. Indeed, the unblemished purity of our tapestry is infamous for causing unease to those who have grown accustomed to living under skies littered with specks. As such, the blinds of the sky were introduced to further ease adjacent realmers into the overwhelming grandeur of the Nexus."
That response brought up even more questions than answers, though it at least gave me a bearing as to the supposed reasoning behind it. "If I may further—"
"No, you may not,"
the Dean interjected warmly, though with a stern undertone that prompted me to abandon the questioning for now.
"For it is time to both choose and feast," he continued,
entering seamlessly into his grandfatherly persona.
As it is my honor to award the highest scoring peer group the honors of first choice.
He cleared his throat, gesturing proudly towards none other than
Lord Quivratom. Your peer group has demonstrated an exemplary display of not just magic, but the ability to synergize each of your peer members' unique personal strengths. As many groups have demonstrated today, the mere act of simply collaborating on a mutual effort is not enough to prove magical synergy. Instead, it is playing to individual strengths, and using those strengths to work towards a mutual end. For that, I award you the highest points out of today's ceremony, 939 points, out of a possible total of 1,000.
The entire room went into an uproarious applause, save for the members of the third and fourth houses who all seemed to simply exist in varying states of disinterest.
As is tradition, you may have first pick of your house,
the dean continued after the applause died down, gesturing to the four houses. Quiv put on a show of thought, as if he even needed to consider what group he was about to choose.
I choose House Shikwaf,
the Gorn-like lizardman proclaimed proudly, garnering the applause of the aforementioned maroon and orange house, whose table was now fervently clicking champagne glasses in a series of toasts. Vanavan, still donning the wizard hat bearing his house colours, opened up the mystery mini-chest to reveal a whole assortment of pins, bearing a series of house-coloured gems arranged to mimic the house sigil, a manticore. And in a display resembling the knighting of a knight, Quiv and the rest of his group knelt down, as Vanavan began applying the small pins onto the front of their school cloaks.
Lord Quivratom and fellows, do you solemnly swear to uphold the principles of House Shikwaf, to forever carry with you the burdens of His Eternal Majesty's first champion, and to slay any false gods should they arise? I do, Professor Vanavan.
They all spoke in unison, rising up to meet the professor with proud and cocky smiles.
House Shikwaf, we once again have the privilege and honour of welcoming first-choice students. 3 cheers for our continued excellence.
An elf, dark purple in skin tone, proclaimed proudly from way down the table.
Hip hip!
He shouted loudly.
Hooray!
The entire table shouted back.
Hip hip! Hooray! Hip hip! Hooray!
The drawn-out nature of the whole affair was not lost on me, and neither was it lost on the gang, as even Eleanor began pouting. Though in his case it probably had more to do with his anticipation for our scores. Quiv and the rest of his group took their seats along the empty portion of the bench, several servants quickly coming to pour both champagne and something they called victory soup. The feasting soon began for the four, as the dean continued on.
To the second choice, I call upon Lord Ordis Ping,
he began, causing Ping's expressions to shift from what I could only describe as a frustrated pout to a prideful smirk. Second place probably wasn't what he was expecting, but clearly getting second pick was at least something.
Despite the lack of synergy amongst your peers, I could still see raw potential and unbridled power overcoming personal grievances to bring about a spectacular display of goal-driven theatrics. Your peers, whilst not masters of the magics you chose, still force their way into a decidedly impressive show. I will, however, recommend that you incorporate each of their personal strengths next time. However, as it stands, your ambition and potential grants you second choice.
The dean's words prompted Ping to bow deeply, the man still respecting authority as much as he seemed to hate the results of it.
You may pick your house, Lord Ping, the dean urged.
However, unlike Quiv's little display, Ping didn't even seem to entertain the theatre of choice.
I choose House Shikwaf,
he proclaimed, garnering yet more clinking and toasts from the house, and the same song and dance from Vanavan. What transpired following Ping's knighting and subsequent seating was a whole lot of nothing. As group,
House Shikwaf.
After group,
House Shikwaf will be our destiny.
After group,
House Shikwaf, Professor.
Continued the song and dance. Until finally things changed. because after a certain point House Shitcraft's ranks were filled, and so the second best house was up next for the same pattern of choice.
House Finferon.
Lord Gummago spoke with an affirmative nod, garnering a series of Gator-style high-fives from his Gator troop. Articord promptly welcomed the man, as the similar knighting ritual to House Shitcraft's followed. Do you, Lord Gummago, swear to uphold the principles of House Finferon, to maintain the foundations of this academy, to uphold legacy and history to the best of your abilities, and to sacrifice all in the construction of a bastion of security for all that was and all that will be? Articord spoke with her signature prideful tone of voice.
Yes, Professor,
Gummago responded. This prompted the fox-like professor to begin pinning House Finferon's pin onto the Gator's cloak, a simple yet elegant silver and bronze pendant, shaped in the form of a griffin posed amidst an intricate open doorway. A few familiar faces likewise landed in House Finferon. This included the turtle-like turtle, and a few more faces from the students' lounge. About half the year group had been whittled down after a good hour. Following that, Eleanor's features grew increasingly nervous, the man watching as the seats for House Finferon were filled, leaving the third best House Thunyandaris ripe for the taking. His slitted pupils slowly constricted with each and every call. As group, House Thunyandaris. After group, House Thunyandaris. After group,
House Thunyandaris it is!
Started filling the ranks of the green and blue house. This all eventually came to a head, as only 4 seats remained. The Venerian held his breath, gripping his fists tight by his side, his eyes now clenched shut as the Dean began the final, meaningful call of the night.
May Lord Rolaria's group please step forward.
The Transgration Academy for the Magical Arts. New Gymnasium. Banquet Hall. Local time 20:45 hours. Eleanor. Life. I felt life-giving mana re-entering my worn and desiccated soul. The Dean's call, despite his obvious falsehoods of sincerity, at least brought with it an authority which meant respite for our ramshackle troop. I was genuinely furious that he hadn't called us sooner, especially when considering the absolute paltry performances on display today. However, I understood the impartiality when it came to assessing the Earthroamer's uninspired demonstration, which, while as impressive as it was still the bare minimum to the rubric, no doubt. Still, this call put us ahead of more than a handful of peer groups, and to that end, I found myself at least mildly satisfied. I took to the stage with a polite smile, and a pride welling deep within my noble chest.
Lord Rolaria, your group has demonstrated a unique combination of martial and artistic prowess. It is also clear that each of you have likewise played to your strengths, which must be applauded. However, this focus on the arts over a serious display of advanced magic, in addition to the lack of participation of one of your group members, forces the faculty into a position where the acknowledgement of the arts comes at odds with the objective results of your scoring. As a result, we award you 593 points out of a total of 1,000.
The Dean concluded, garnering a stalwart reaction from me. Though deep within, my mind seethed, as 100 different insults sweltered beneath the ire of a raging dragon. You uncultured swine! You ignoble clod! Is the Academy not called the Academy of the Magical Arts?
You may choose your house, Lord Rolaria,
he continued, merely adding fuel to the growing fires of my frustrations, prompting me to turn to the less than ideal choice. The Felinor's table. I could already see many faces of those who would otherwise be beneath my magical potential. Moreover, I could also see the tired and despondent faces of those who were caught between worlds. Not good enough to be best or second place, yet not pathetic enough to make it to last place. The middle children. The thought pained me, for reasons more personal than I wish to admit.
I immediately severed that thought, for the irony it brought upon my life was unbearable. I choose House Thunyandaris, I announced, prompting a series of soft claps from the house in question. We approached the head of the table, heads held high towards a perpetually smiling Professor Chiska, who promptly began pinning the house's pins on our cloaks.
Lord Eleanor Ilaria and fellows, do you all accept the oaths of this house? To be true to yourselves and to follow the path you believe is right? To be vigilant against that which is evil? And to strive for excellence, even in the face of your own perceived mundanity?
I held my breath, tensing, as I allowed what was formerly a completely foreign thought to enter my mind. Be happy with what you have, for you could have lost it all. Yes, Professor Chiska, I spoke in unison with the rest of this sad troop.
The Transgression Academy for the Magical Arts. New Gymnasium. Banquet Hall. Local time 21:20 hours. Emma. There was only one conversation throughout that entire dinner, and it was primarily a yap-off between our group and Chiska. The rest of the table seemed entirely aloof, with only a few curious gazes coming my way. Stranger still, it was Houses Shikwaf and Thinthrawn's upper yearsmen who seemed more laser-focused on me, as they constantly looked over their shoulders, whispering under magical privacy screens amongst themselves and their new housemates. I'd attempted to raise the issue regarding the stars with Chiska, though a combined effort between Thacia and Eleanor quickly brought those attempts to a halt. 15 minutes later, en route to the dorms. I can't believe a Tholin scored below us, I began, a clear twinge of remorse colouring my voice.
The man is magically weak, Cadet Imabuka, Eleanor began with a haughty laugh. His family, his holdings, and indeed his entire way of life exists because of the strength of Nexian magic and the peace and certainty it brings. This has made him and his house soft, complacent to the security of the world. He eschews the responsibilities inherent to a noble, namely the honing of one's magical potential for more worldly endeavours such as trade, statecraft, and commerce.
But shouldn't the Nexus want nobles with those skills? I countered.
You misunderstand me, Cadet Imabuka. What I'm saying is that the man is using the pursuit of the worldly as an excuse for his responsibilities to the magical. Any noble worth their mettle should be mastering both magic and worldly endeavours. Lord Asila is dangerously favouring one and leaving what makes him noble foolishly neglected, the Venerian surmised. All throughout the long walk back to the dorms, I tried to keep the topic honed in on anything but the stars, as per the group's request, which was easy for the first leg of it, since there was a lot from the event to unpack. However, the closer we got to our room, the antsier I became, as each window, each open-air hallway, and each slit carved into the wall became yet another spectacle to gawk at. This partly reminded me of how it felt like visiting a cellar from Valley Hill for the first time. The light pollution, despite being mitigated through policy, simply overpowered most of the stars. That experience should have softened the blow of the Nexus's starless skies, but it didn't. As the cognitive dissonance between the sheer ruralness of Transgratia combined with the complete darkness of the skies, made for an incongruent picture that just did not compute in my head. If there had been something even remotely similar to an Acellan skyline nearby, then sure, that would slide. But with an endless expanse of greenery punctuated by a few rural settlements, with no significant glow to speak of, the scenery reminded me of an even less developed Valley Hill. And Valley Hill always had a brilliant night sky to frame it. The Nexus, however, didn't. Not even one tiny speck of light. All that existed here was darkness. Darkness without the warm glow of city lights. This all came to a head as we finally arrived at the dorms, as I unloaded all of my questions. Dragon's Heart Tower, Level 23, Residence 30, Living Room. Local time, 21:45 hours. Emma. Could any of you tell me exactly what the heck is going on out there? I pointed vigorously out the window. What's with the lack of stars?
What's with the void of a sky? This question prompted everyone to collectively peer over towards the nearest window, each of them seemingly captivated by something that I wasn't seeing. If you mean the canvas of the grand tapestry, Cadet Emma Booker, then yes, I can certainly see the void you speak of. However, what I see, and what I've always seen from my earliest memories, is a brilliant display of his eternal light. Eleanor responded first, garnering a cock of my head, as Thacia quickly chimed in to fill the gap. Do you recall our conversations regarding mana streams, Emma? Yes, I do, I nodded, before the realization hit me. Wait, don't tell me. Indeed, Earthrealmer, Eleanor smiled. You lack the ability to visualize what all of us have the privilege of seeing. A brilliant display of vibrant mana, dancing amidst a darkened canvas, like a banner fluttering in a gale storm. Brilliant hues of every shade you can imagine, waltzing in an eternally dark ballroom. I fell silent upon that revelation, as I once again felt a gut punch pulling the wind right out of my sails. I was the only person in the room who couldn't see colour. Frustration, followed by a pang of sadness, racked me. However, just as quickly as those feelings hit me, so too did I manage to ground myself. Just because I lacked it didn't mean I was lesser for it. These weren't limitations, just obstacles to overcome. Project Wand Step for Mankind was going to help me in this regard. But even without it, I could exist well and fine without mana sight. I took a moment to pause, bringing up a tablet as I pulled up some stock footage of both the Aurora Borealis and Aurora Australis. So, something along these lines? I asked the group. Yes, Eleanor nodded, but much, much more vibrant and less dead, the Venerian concluded. And without those stars in the backdrop too, I'm imagining, I promptly added. Naturally, Earthrealmer, Eleanor acknowledged smugly. Right, okay. This provides some vital context for the Dean's earlier answer, I sighed. I'm assuming these magical auroras are a Nexian thing then? I paused, garnering nods from Thacia and Thalmin. All right, good to know. But the important question aside from the fancy light show is this. What the heck's going on with the lack of stars? I've come up with a few theories, but I'd like to hear it from... They're dead, Earthrealmer, Eleanor responded proudly. I'm sorry? I know this may be hard to understand, and indeed your choice of words is somewhat perplexing, so I'll take great effort in explaining this simply. These stars you speak of? Each speck of light in the night sky that once polluted our grand canvas? They were once gods. Minor, major, and everything in between. His Eternal Majesty defeated them, consumed them, and once he did, their presence in the tapestry above diminished, along with their wretched lives. I paused at that, trying to rack my head around Eleanor's explanation, as I attempted to wrangle together a new hypothesis. Is he being metaphorical? Is the Nexus perhaps just that late into his cosmic timeline? Maybe this is a religious explanation for the disappearance of stars due to universal expansion. No, it can't be. The timescales don't add up. The Nexus hasn't existed for that long. It takes billions of years between seeing stars and losing sight of them, if we're going by the expansion theory. So is this actually literal? Eleanor? I began with a sigh, getting straight to the point. What do you actually know about stars? This caught the Venerian off guard, prompting him to narrow his eyes. Are you calling me daft? No, Eleanor. I'm genuinely asking here. No pettiness, no jabs, nothing. I spoke earnestly. I want you to tell me what you know about stars. I understand that they are different in other realms, the Venerian shrugged. But in the Nexus, these specks of light you speak of were once the manaphysical manifestations of gods, all hanging overhead, taunting mortals with their infinite power. Their destruction led to the creation of His Majesty's light, as well as the sun and the moon, a monument to the defeat of the gods and the freeing of mana. I chewed this concept for a few moments, allowing myself to take the Venerian's words at face value for once. Right, so how high up were these balls of mana? How should I know, Earthrealmer? I'm not an astrologer. Eleanor shot back defensively. Right, okay. So, next question then. You know that stars do exist in adjacent realms, correct?
Yes?
So, how would you explain those?
Ah, you would believe me a fool.
The Venerian slammed back with a gotcha moment.
As I stated previously, stars are different in realms beyond the Nexus, for they are imperfections, tears in an otherwise seamless canvas.
I paused, realizing that right there was where we both hit our respective fundamental systematic incongruences. I quickly turned to Thacia and Thalmin, but more so the latter, as I yet to have dived deep into the Lupinor's understanding on the matter. Thalmin?
If you're asking me for what I assume the stars to be, Emma, then I cannot tell you. What I do know, however, is that they're useful tools for navigation. Through careful and calculated surveying, the stars aided us in discovering the finite nature of our world. Alas, that is all I know of them, for I am not a scholar learned in such a far-removed field of study.
I quickly turned to Thacia, but not before Eleanor and Thalmin interjected. The latter, starting with a concerned tone of voice.
Emma, are you claiming to know something we don't regarding the stars above the adjacent realms?
The former, however, approached me with a scowl and an unamused tone of voice.
You seem troubled by perfection, Earthrealmer. I understand your need to cope with such prodigious revelations. However, discussing stars will not net you the satisfaction you seek. Prince Thalmin is correct in his assertions, that these stars serve little more than to aid you in the navigation of your finite realms. What else is there to discuss about them? Why are you seemingly infatuated with our lack of them?
I took a moment to regard both of their concerns before letting out a long sigh. It's because I want to know what the Nexus is, and more importantly, what lies beyond it. You can claim whatever you want about the Nexus itself, but seeing your starless skies prompted me to figure out what lies above it.
Above it?
Eleanor cocked his head, followed immediately by Thalmin. The space above an adjacent realm. The abyss of darkness that hangs above, I began. Thacia chiming in soon after. The oceans of stars. The princess managed out ominously, parroting my words from our earlier interactions with the library.
Nothing hangs above, Earthrealmer.
Eleanor shot back incredulously.
I am certain the same goes for adjacent realms. You speak as if you know what lies above, as if you've actually touched the tapestry itself.
I mean, we've studied it for millennia, and
through mannerless means, you're claiming to have somehow reached it?
I took a moment to pause, levelling my eyes towards the Venerian. I'll do you one better, Eleanor. We haven't just reached the tapestry. We've actually ripped right through it. This caused the Venerian to pause, his now light blue scales growing even paler.
Oh, have you now? He spoke for a derisive chuckle. Next thing you'll be claiming you've actually visited these so-called specks of light.
We have, I responded bluntly. That answer finally drained the last of the Venerian's colour, as Thalmin's features darkened in equal measures. I think it's time we talked about our mastery over the skies, the heavens, and the nature of the void which hangs above.